Yes. Okay, I have 7:40, and we have Jeff Mullen here and Michael Brown and Mr. Rowe, and I think Mr. Joe Henning in the background. Deb Keller is here, and I think Mr. Adams is out there in virtual land. So let me give a preamble, open this meeting, give a preamble, and then we'll see what we do with Mr. Bonomi's application to open this hearing so that he could participate and ask questions. And let me introduce myself. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals. With us this evening is the board member Jeffrey Mullen and board member Michael Brown, both participating virtually. This matter really arises out of an application by Adams Capital LLC seeking to have a special permit issued for premises located at 34 Forest Street in Milton. By way of background, we originally conducted a hearing on this application virtually on August 13th, 2020. And at that point in time, there was no opposition to Adams Capital's application to pursuant to Section 4A for a special permit to import 1,380 cubic yards of fill. The board previously had allowed an application of Mr. and Mrs. Stokel regarding this same property, but with a slightly different design and a different building. And the Stokels were permitted to bring in basically twice that number of cubic yards. They were permitted to bring in 2691 cubic yards of fill. So the hearing, the first hearing with Adams Capital, there was no opposition, and the board voted unanimously to grant a special permit to import 1,380 yards of cubic fill. The day after that hearing, which would have been September 18th, Mr. Bonomi contacted the Board of Appeals and stated that he was telephonically present at the hearing, and we saw his name at the bottom of the picture, that he wanted to ask some questions of the applicant and otherwise wanted to be heard, but that for some technical reason, he was not able to speak. At that hearing on the 17th of September, we asked the public 4 or 5 times if anyone wanted to speak, had any questions or comments, and there was only a Mr. Petrick who participated to a small extent. So on the 18th, we spoke to Mr. Bonomi, and he requested the opportunity to be heard at this hearing, so that we duly advertised this public hearing for 2 purposes. The first purpose is to determine whether the board, under the circumstances that Mr. Bonomi was supposed to present us with, had shown sufficient reason to allow the board to reopen the hearing so that he could be heard and could ask Ms. Keller, the representative of Adams Capital LLC, any questions. And then if that motion were allowed, then we would take additional evidence and then decide whether we would change the allowance of the special permit. We did allow it with a lot of very technical conditions after the voluminous report by Merrill Engineering was filed. Mr. Rowe and Mr. Joe Henning retained consulting engineer Michael Giuliano, a registered professional of Eaglebrook Engineering Survey, to review all of the filings by Merrill and to examine the property. And as a result, we had Mr. Giuliano's, excuse me, report dated August 12th, 2020. We had it at the original hearing, and it was Mr. Giuliano's opinion that the applicant has provided sufficient mitigation as set forth in the Merrill engineering reports so as to not adversely impact downstream properties from stormwater runoff generated from the site improvements. So, so duly noticed this hearing with notices going to all of the abutters and to Mr. Bonomi, who, just for the record, resides at 60 Forest Street. So I think the first order of business is to deal with Mr. Bonomi's motion to reopen this hearing so that he can be heard. Let me just ask for the state of the record. Mr. Bonomi, are you present either virtually or telephonically so as to support your motion to reopen this hearing? And I hear no response. Jim, do you, looking at your technical information in the computer, does Mr. Bonomi have any virtual or telephonic connection with this hearing? And I think the answer to that is no, because Jim said that he would notify it if Mr. Bonomi was in fact participating. So unless my fellow board members, Mr. Mullen and Mr. Brown, have any other suggestions, I think we should put Mr. Bonomi's motion to a vote here and now. Let me just ask Mr. Mullen, do you want to be heard at all on Mr. Bonomi's oral motion to reopen the hearing and be heard?
No, I don't need to be heard.
Okay.
I don't. I mean, I mean, we're here. I'm happy to do what. I'm happy to listen to whatever the evidence is, but perhaps there is no evidence. So, you know, if I don't know. I'm not exactly sure I understand the question, Mr. Chairman, actually, but
I'm going to pose the motion of Mr. Bonomi as to whether to reopen this hearing so that he can be heard and perhaps introduce additional information or make a statement. It doesn't appear that he is either virtually or telephonically connected to this hearing. I don't think he's present.
yeah.
And I just, before I bring the motion to a vote, I wanted to know if you had anything to say, any words of wisdom or.
No, I'm fine. I'm good. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Mr. Brown, do you have any anything you'd like to say at this particular time regarding Mr. Bonomi's oral motion to reopen these hearings?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. So the question, let me ask. I should ask just generally. Does anybody present at this hearing have any thing they'd like to say regarding Mr. Bonomi's motion to reopen the hearing? In that regard, I should say that the board did receive an email from Andrew Adams, the principal of Andrew Adams Construction Consulting, Inc., and of the applicant here, the manager of the LLC. And somewhat of a lengthy memorandum, but in essence, Mr. Adams objects to the reopening of this hearing, saying that he waited many months to get to this point. A lot of money on engineering. We had a meeting that was full and complete, and that he feels that if the hearing was reopened, it would cause additional delays because he would not be able to get a proposed residence weather tight for finishing through the winter. And that would be a costly endeavor to him. He thinks that the board properly voted the approval of the special permit, and they want to have the special permit prepared and filed with the town clerk so that he will not be any further delayed. So Mr. Adams, there's correspondence. Is there anybody else out there who'd like to be heard on Mr. Bonomi's oral motion to open these hearings? Okay, there's no such person present. So the issue before the board is whether the board has received sufficient information from Mr. Bonomi so as to warrant the board, both as a matter of its own discretion and as a matter of law, to reopen this public hearing and permit Mr. Bonomi to be heard, ask questions, and otherwise submit technical evidence. So all those, does any board member want to be heard on that application, in that motion? No.
Well,
So we'll put it to a vote. Mr. Jeffrey Mullen, how do you vote on Mr. Bonomi's motion?
I'm not in favor of it, John. If you were here, I'd be happy to hear from him. I'm concerned about reopening the hearing to set a new appeal period to further delay the proceedings. I also remember Mr. Bonomi from the first hearing, and I know what his issues were, but I actually think they were fully accommodated in the design that was done and the review that was commissioned by Mr. Rowe and Mr. Johanning. And so I feel like not only is he not here, unfortunately, to be heard, if we did open the hearing, we'd cause some harm. And moreover, and I think significantly or importantly, I believe that the issues that he raised in the previous hearing have been addressed in the current hearing. So I'm not in favor of reopening the hearing. Long way of saying no.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll do a roll call after I ask Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, do you want to say anything in support or opposition to this motion?
Yeah, I oppose reopening the hearing, particularly because Mr. Bonomi is not here to explain his reasons for asking the board to do that.
Okay. Well, I agree with both of my colleagues, and I have sympathy for Mr. Adams. He's been delayed further here, and so let me do a roll call vote. Mr. Mullen, how do you vote on Mr. Bonomi's motion to reopen the hearing?
No.
Mr. Brown?
No.
The chair votes no as well. So we are voting 3-0 not to reopen this hearing for the reasons stated. And I will tell Mr. Adams that I have this particular file, and I will do my very best to get this decision prepared with dispatch so that it can be circulated and filed with the town clerk, and the 20-day waiting period will start to run. So is there any further matters to come before the board, or does anybody want to be heard at all? Okay, there's nobody who wants to be heard. So do I hear a motion to adjourn this hearing?
So moved.
Mullen? And do I hear a second from Mr. Brown?
Second.
And so all those in favor of adjourning this hearing, please say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks.